إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله قال الله تعالى بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا توبوا إلى الله توبة نصوحا أما بعد. When we think about Iman and we think about the usul of Islam, or the foundational or the core foundational traits of Islam, or the core foundational traits of Iman, that give us the sense that somebody is leading a life that's oriented towards the hereafter, or a life that centers around Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, usually there are a couple of things that come to mind. So the things that tend to come to mind initially are the ritual prayers, things like zakat, things like giving sadaqah, things like performing the pilgrimage, or perhaps there could be some cultural elements such as dress, language, or food. However, when the scholars, when they talk about the salient traits of Iman, what we look to when we consider that a person is a person of Iman, they speak, yes, about the external actions, but what they begin with is what they call a'malul qulub, or a'malul qalb, the actions of the heart. So the governing principles of Islam, they rest on these a'mal of these actions of the heart. And these actions, or these deeds, or these states of the heart are, for example, loving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, loving Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, having tawakkul in Allah, having and expressing gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, having patience, having hope and fear in Allah. All of these things the scholars mention are wajib, they are fard. Now when we hear these words wajib, fard, usually these elicit thoughts of this salah is wajib, witr is wajib. It's fard for an animal to be slaughtered in a particular way before we can consider it halal and before we can eat it. It's fard for X amount of dowry to be paid to the wife. It's fard for the wife to do this for the husband and the husband to do this for the wife. But all of these things, all of these examples that we've given, there's some sort of discussion. The scholars discuss whether witr is wajib and sunnah. These are up for debate, they're up for discussion. The exact method that an animal should be slaughtered in, these are up for debate, these are up for discussion. The dowry and the conditions when it comes to nikah, when it comes to, these are all debatable, and the scholars discuss and debate amongst themselves. But when it comes to these a'mal al-qalb, these actions of the heart, Ibn Taymiyyah, he says, فَهَذِهِ الْأَعْمَالِ جَمِيعًا وَاجِبَةً. All of these things are absolutely necessary, على الجميع, for everyone, without exception. And باتفاق أئمة الدين, and all of the scholars of Islam, without exception, are unanimous, and they agree that these things are absolutely necessary. So what we're saying is that when it comes to, is there a scholar from the scholars of Islam that says, you don't have to express patience? You won't find one. Is there a scholar from the scholars of Islam that says that you don't have to have tawakkul in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Is there a scholar from the scholars of Islam who has ever said that, it's okay if some of your deeds are sincerely for Allah and some are sincere, you can have mixed intentions here then? You won't find them. So these are the actions that are the bedrock, or these are the actions, or the actions of the heart are the bedrock for anything else that emanates on the limbs. So what is the heart, and what's the significance of the heart in Islam, and what's the relation of the heart to external actions? Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam says in the hadith, ألا وإن في الجسد مضغة إذا صلحت صلح الجسد كله وإذا فسدت فسد الجسد كله ألا وهي القلب. He says sallallahu alayhi wasallam that in the body there is a lump of flesh, a mudghah, and if it's sound, then the whole of the body is sound, and if it's corrupted, then the whole body is corrupted. ألا وهي القلب. And he mentions that this is the heart. So the rest of the body and all the actions that emanate from the body are subservient to the heart. Your actions and the deeds that we perform are subservient to one's heart. So sometimes we have this notion of, such and such a person, he commits X, Y, and Z sin. He has contempt for the hudud of Allah. He's disrespectful to his parents. He engages maybe in backbiting here and there, a little bit of gossiping. He might lie and cheat, but he has a clean heart. So you might list all the offenses that this person engages in, and then at the end of it, but he has a clean heart. He's got a clean heart. And this notion really is alien to Islam, because like we said, the actions that we perform are completely subservient to the state that our hearts are in. So there has to be an alignment between what we feel inside and the actions that we perform externally. So when we think of actions of the heart and we think of diseases of the heart, on the other hand, so we have things like jealousy. And on the other hand, what we should work towards is inculcating some sort of contentment in our lives. You have people who suffer from pride and arrogance who need to work on that and counter it with some humility. You might have people who suffer from miserliness, and on the other hand, you have generosity. You have people who love and have love for the material things in this world, and they should strive to seek those things that are transcendent and beyond this world. And the topic of our discussion today, which is going to be on sincerity, ikhlas. So you have those who are unfortunately insincere. They seek praise, they might seek pleasure, they might seek reward from something or someone other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the first thing to mention is that the whole of the body is subservient to the state of the heart. Hence why, what is taqwa? If you think about the whole concept of taqwa, if we were to judge that a person was a muttaqi, someone who has taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, again, we don't look at the righteous deeds that they perform. What we look at is that we look at the internal state of the heart of that particular person that compels them and motivates them to behave in a particular way. So there's a distinction between the two. It's not the performance of the deed, it's the state of the heart that compels you and motivates you to perform those deeds. Hence why when the Prophet ﷺ was asked about taqwa, he said, pointing to his chest, at-taqwatu hahuna. Taqwa is here. Taqwa resides, or taqwa emanates from one's heart. Another relevant hadith here, which we've heard a number of times, and this is a hadith which is one of the foundational hadith in the deen. In fact, Imam Ahmad says that it encompasses 1/3 of Islam. Imam Bukhari starts his hadith collection off with this particular hadith. Imam Shafi'i says that this particular hadith is the basis of 70 legal discussions or 70 chapters in fiqh. And that is إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. Every single action that we do is judged and based according to the intention that one has. So every worship, every charity, every good deed is based on and judged in accordance to the intention that is behind that particular deed. If you look at Surah Al-Mulk, a surah that we're encouraged to recite as a means of protection from the punishment of the grave, amongst other things. الَّذِي خَلَقَ الْمَوْتَ وَالْحَيَاةَ لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ أَيُّكُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He creates death and He creates life in order to test which one of us is أحسن عملا. Now Fudayl bin Iyad, one of the Salaf, he mentions that what's meant here by أحسن عملا? What's the best deed? And they describe the best deed as being أخلصه, the one that is most sincere. The deed that's filled with sincerity is the best deed. وأصوبه, meaning the deed that's most correct. And Ibn al-Qayyim explains that most correct here is the action that's done in accordance with the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So no deed in and of itself, no deed in and of itself is enough. Yeah, it's all about the intention behind that particular deed. So if you reflect on another hadith where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he mentions to us that the first people who will be held to account on the day of judgment are 3 people. Now, I just want you to pause and reflect on the virtue of these particular deeds and the fact that these deeds are some of the best deeds that anybody could potentially perform. The first was, the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, the first person to be asked and the first person to be judged on the day of judgment will be the mujahid. So he'll be brought forward and he'd be asked, what is it that you did in this world? And he'd respond that I fought in your way, O Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah would respond to him and say, kadhabt, you lied. You lied. The reason why you went out in jihad is because you wanted people to say that you're brave and you're strong and X, Y, and Z. فَقَدْ قِيلَ, and that was said. So the intention that you had was for people to praise you. And you got that. So I have nothing for you here. And then the angels will be commanded to take that person, drag him on his face, and throw him into the hellfire. The second person that will be asked is the person who studied the Quran and he taught the Quran. Or the person who was a reciter, likewise. He will be asked, what is it that you did in this world? And he would respond, I taught the Quran, I studied the Quran, I would read the Quran for your sake, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah will say, kadhabt, you lied. The reason why you did that is because you wanted people to say, alim, mashallah, this guy's an alim, or mashallah, this guy is a qari. فَقَدْ قِيلَ, and people said that. So you got your reward. Your action is rewarded in accordance to your intention. And the third person is the person who would give or often give in charity. So that same person will be brought, he'll be asked, what is it that you did? And he said, I gave X, Y, Z for your sake, Ya Allah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will respond, Kadhabt, yeah, you lied. You did it because you wanted the people to say that you were generous. فَقَدْ قِيلَ, and it was said. And again, the person will be dragged on his face and thrown into the hellfire. Now these three deeds, again, the mujahid, the teacher of the Quran, or the alim, and the person who donates, we know the virtue of these deeds. These are some of the greatest deeds that one can engage in. Think about the rewards that are associated with these particular deeds, and think about these deeds. Imagine you're a teacher of the Quran. Imagine you are somebody who gives countless number of donations in charity, but these deeds are the means for you being thrown into the hellfire. So it's all about, like we said, all about having ikhlas in our intentions, having sincere intentions whenever we perform any of these actions. So what is ikhlas? The scholars differ as to the definition of ikhlas, and Ibn al-Qayyim brings a number of definitions. I'll mention one or two. One is that one's external actions correspond and mirror your internal state. So there's not this sense of hypocrisy where you're acting in one particular way and your internal state is the complete opposite. The second is singling out Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in everything that we do. And we seek reward, we seek praise from Him alone and nobody else, or none of the creation. And the third one is interesting, where Ibn al-Qayyim mentions that a person, or the way that we can recognize or we can define ikhlas is that if somebody thinks that they are a mukhlis, then that person is not mukhlis. Meaning the person who thinks he has a sincere intention, that's exactly what it means not to have sincerity. Which is interesting if you reflect on it. So if you think that, oh, this sincerity thing, I've clocked it, I've got it, that person's not sincere. Yeah, so sincerity is having this humility about being sincere and not feeling safe that you are sincere. It's not a checkbox situation. You don't get a sincerity badge, get a certificate, and move on, and now you can continue with your actions. Yeah, sincerity is something then that you need to work on. You need to work on continually. So in sum, your external aligns with your internal. You do things for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you seek reward from Him alone, and you don't fall into the trap of thinking, yeah, this sincerity thing, I've nailed it, I've got it down. The Salaf as well, they'd often say that the most difficult thing for them to get right was sincerity. Meaning that sincerity is something that you have to work on continually. It's an ongoing process. Yeah, so they'd say, كم أجتهد في إسقاط الرياء عن قلبي. How much do I work hard? I have to constantly strive and struggle to rid myself of any ostentation, to rid myself of any showing off, to rid myself of looking towards other people and seeing how they perceive me from my heart. And they say that it was as if I'd get rid of it from one action that I do and it would just pop up somewhere else. So to give an example, let's say that when you're praying salah, if you're around people, mashallah, extend the qiyam, you recite much longer, you extend your ruku', you extend your sujood, and everything's beautiful, you're pausing perfectly well in each of the positions, and your salah is like A grade, amazing salah. But then when you're behind closed doors, it's the complete opposite. As quickly as possible, you just get the thing done, and you carry on back to your Netflix or whatever it was that you were doing. Now, that person might work on his salah. He might work on his salah and try and imbibe that type of sincerity into his salah to the point where when he prays at home and when he prays in the masjid, when he prays in front of people and when he prays by himself, it's all the same. So he's worked on that, mashallah, he's worked on the sincerity on that particular issue, but it pops up somewhere else. You might be volunteering for the Abrahamic Foundation. And the only time you commit to volunteering for the Abrahamic Foundation if there's a public event. If there's a public event where people can see you, if there's a public event where they can see, mashallah, look at this brother or sister, he's busy in the kitchen, he's busy on the front door, he's busy in the office, he's busy organizing X, Y, Z. But if you're asked to come in on a day when nobody else is in the building, nobody can see you, or you're asked to do something from home, perhaps in your own time, and give some time to the Abrahamic Foundation, or give some time to whatever volunteer sort of endeavor that you're engaged in, again, the sincerity or the lack of sincerity pops up somewhere else, because you're only interested in doing it if people are going to see you and people are going to acknowledge that you've done it and potentially give you that praise for it. Okay, what are the stages or two things that are mentioned by Ibn al-Qayyim that we can do to remove these blemishes on our heart and rid ourselves from falling into insincerity? So three things, and the first thing is knowing and acknowledging that everything that we do is ultimately from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and is a result of Allah's favor upon us. Every action that we have been given the tawfiq even to perform is because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He has guided us. So mentioned in the Quran, وَقَالُوا الْحَمْدُ لِلَّهِ الَّذِي هَدَانَا لِهَذَا وَمَا كُنَّا لَنَهْتَدِيَ لَوْلَا أَنْ هَدَانَ اللَّهِ. All praise is due and thanks to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the one who guided us. And if Allah hadn't guided us, then we simply wouldn't have been guided. How many of us are in that particular position? In another ayah in Surah Al-Hujurat, it's mentioned, وَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّ فِيكُمْ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ لَوْ يُطِيعُكُمْ فِي كَثِيرٍ مِّنَ الْأَمْرِ لَعَنِتُّمْ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ حَبَّبَ إِلَيْكُمُ الْإِيمَانَ وَزَيَّنَهُ فِي قُلُوبِكُمْ. Allah is the one who حَبَّبَ إِلَيْكُمُ الْإِيمَانَ. He's made Iman something that's beloved to you. وَزَيَّنَهُ فِي قُلُوبِكُمْ. And He's beautified Iman into your hearts. وَكَرَّهَ إِلَيْكُمُ الْكُفْرَ وَالْفُسُوقَ وَالْإِسْيَانَ. And Allah is the one who's made kufr, has made detested to you kufr, disbelief, and transgressing the limits of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, wal-isyan, and being disobedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah has caused us to experience this state of Iman. Allah has blessed us with Iman. Allah has blessed us with guidance. Allah has blessed us with teachers and organizations, teachers who sometimes they go off for decades to study only to come back and to give back to our communities. Allah has blessed us with these people. Allah has blessed us now even to be able to learn and develop from the comfort of our own homes. Allah has blessed us to be around brothers and sisters who work tirelessly behind the scenes in our masajid and in our community centers. Allah has blessed us to the point where you can go anywhere and pick up free literature. There's so many countless blessings. And then if at the end of the day you were to perform a good deed, do you deserve a pat on the back? Is there anyone else who deserves recognition for that? Is there anyone else who deserves praise for something like that? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has facilitated everything for you. So it makes absolutely no sense for your intentions to be tainted whereby you're looking at other people. Allah is the ultimate source of everything that we do. ذَلِكَ فَضْلُ اللَّهِ يُؤْتِيهِ مَن يَشَاءُ. Allah, this is all the fadl of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and He gives it to whoever He pleases. So every action that we are given the privilege of performing, or the tawfiq, is a virtue from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His bounty and His ultimate mercy. The second step, or the second thing to bear in mind, is knowing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and knowing ourselves. So the saying goes, "Man arafa nafsahu arafa rabbah." Yeah, so there's some discussion about the authenticity, but essentially the hadith means that whoever appreciates and knows one's own weaknesses, whoever knows one's own dependence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whoever knows of one's own neediness, he can truly appreciate the strength of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he can truly appreciate the power, the absolute perfection of Allah and His names and attributes. So we are the ones who are dependent on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah is completely self-sufficient and independent of anything. So when we reflect on what makes us who we are, where we came from, what we are doing here, our role on this earth, and ultimately that we're going to return back to Allah, as we always say, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. It makes no sense then. It makes no sense for our intentions to be tainted with pleasing anyone other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the process of attaining ikhlas is to train yourself. Yeah, you have to keep, it's something that's an ongoing process that you have to keep working at. And I'll just end with something that when we reflect on the life of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, Abu Bakr, his companions or his peers used to say that the sun neither rose nor set on anyone who is better than Abu Bakr as-Siddiq after the prophets. And the Prophet ﷺ, once a woman came to him and she wanted to see him for some sort of a need. Now, he happened to be busy at the time, so he told her to come back at a later time. So she said, "Oh Rasulullah, if I come back and I don't find you, what am I supposed to do?" So Rasulullah ﷺ said, "Go to Abu Bakr. If you don't find the Prophet of Allah, then go and seek whatever you need from Abu Bakr as-Siddiq." And then furthermore, Abu Bakr, the Prophet ﷺ said that there was nobody's wealth that benefited me more than the wealth of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. And when Abu Bakr hears this famously, he starts to cry and he says, "My wealth is, everything that I have is for you, Ya Rasulullah." This very companion, this man, Abu Bakr, he said radiallahu anhu, that if one of his feet were in Jannah, he still wouldn't feel safe. He's practically stepping into Jannah and he still wouldn't feel safe. So this is the point about injecting and constantly checking ourselves when it comes to our intentions. So to recap, know that everything that we do ultimately is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah is the eternal, Allah is the provider, Allah is the sustainer, Allah is the creator of absolutely everything and does things out of His mercy. We are subservient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We know where we came from, we know what we're doing here, and we know ultimately where we're going to go. And finally, just remember that intention can get compromised. It's not about having a good intention at the beginning. Intention can get compromised along the way. So there's a long process where we have to get into a habit of constantly scrutinizing our intentions. And the fruits of sincere intention go well beyond this world. The rewards, the benefits, the return for a sincere deed are eternal. As they say, مَا كَانَ لِلَّهِ يَبْقَى. Whatever we do for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will remain and is eternal. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us from those who are sincere in their servitude to Him. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us from those who cleanse and purify our hearts from anything that may compromise sincerity. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us from those who remain consistent on checking our sincerity and intentions, and may He make us from those who listen and benefit from what we hear. Allahumma akhrijna min dhulumati al-jahli wal-wahm ila nuri al-ma'rifati wal-fahm. بارك الله لي ولكم في القرآن العظيم ونفعنا وإياكم بما فيه من الآيات والذكر الحكيم. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم.